my sister and I were driving in the middle of a storm, and we got into an accident, and we were fine, but we just started talking. Maybe we should start a business someday. And I've always wanted to sell furniture, and I'm like, well, sure, I can join you too, and maybe I can sell some of my own things. If you have a passion that your material, you already have 75% of what's needed to become an entrepreneur, because you are an expert in your field. Yes, the money is good. I'm a materialist. I like having nice things just as much as the next guy, but your time, you're seeing like your best years just be taken up. You have no social life. You can't do anything other than take care of your business round the clock.
All right, so welcome back to the DreamWalk podcast, everyone, where we bring you real stories from business owners who are actually in the trenches, building, scaling, and successfully selling and transitioning out of their businesses. I'm your host, Andy, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Jeff. So today's episode is one that I've been looking forward to. We're joined by Rasiel Suarez, an entrepreneur who went from building a business from zero to generating over $500,000 a year, and ultimately selling and transitioning out of that business and moving into a completely different phase in his life. So Rasiel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so this episode is really about your full journey, the highs, the struggles, the moments where things almost fell apart, and what it actually takes to build, scale, and successfully sell and transition out of a business. So maybe we can start by the beginning. Rasiel, can you take us back to when you first started a furniture business with your sister? What led to that decision?
Yeah, it is funny that it started out as the idea of a furniture business. My sister and I were driving in the middle of a storm, and we got into an accident, and we were fine, but we just started talking. Maybe we should start a business someday. And I've always wanted to sell furniture, and I'm like, well, sure, I can join you too, and maybe I can sell some of my own things, and just like a little e-commerce website. And sure enough, a few weeks later, she incorporated the name and got a website. And I said, well, I'll join in by starting to sell samples of the elements from the periodic table. Because it was just like a hobby that I did, and I thought maybe there'd be some people who would be interested. And before you know it, like as soon as we went online, almost immediately we started getting sales. And I'm like, I don't understand what's happening. But sure enough, people took to it. And she did not sell not even one piece of furniture. But my side, which was like the lesser side of the business, just took off immediately. This was back in 2015, I want to say. And within 2 or 3 months, my sister said, I'm not really doing anything here. Just take the business and continue, because there's no furniture to be sold online, and this is really going well for you. So she gave me the business, and she also put in the seed money in the beginning. She really believed in what we could do with it. So I started importing from China raw materials, and then we would basically resell it online for mostly science collectible crowd. There just isn't much of an industry for that. So I think that's why we were able to tap into a segment of the population that there really wasn't an industry for. You can't really locate much. You'd have to buy a little here, a little there, but there isn't anything that was a focus for people who had this interest to go and buy stuff online. And that's how it started. It just, from day one, was success. We never went into debt or anything like that, other than just a family debt, of hey, here's some money, and go to town, have fun. That's how it started.
All right. So, although it was, unfortunate that you guys had to experience the accidents, and then just eventually thought about, why don't we start a business? And then the business that you're starting, like you said, had to also lead to the hobby that you were doing, and that was what really boomed, or that was what really got successful as your business. And as I was also looking through like Luciferia when it was with you, I was also quite interested, because I didn't really know, like you said, which industry your business was in. So I was quite interested, and then I went and looked online, and then I saw like your domes, I saw like the cube. So I was like, oh, these are so pretty. So I was wondering, how do I get these shipped here into the Philippines? Those are so pretty. So, and I'm not really into a lot of science, but me being in the creatives, I would say if I could like have these displayed in my house, it would make my house really be extraordinary. So, yeah. How about you,
Well,
Jeff?
thank you. So many people start exactly that way. They're like, wow, I don't know anything about this, but it looks
Right.
nice to have, and it's something cool to have on a desktop or as, just an idea, something on a wall or something like that. And there just wasn't anything like that on the market, except for, again, you could find those things a little here, a little there, but nothing that focused as a hub for it at that time. And that became the business plan just on its own. And then we grew organically, and you start listening to feedback from customers. Oh, I'd like this. Then you start hearing the same things over and over, and you start thinking, well, if 2 or 3 people are saying this, then chances are there's many more who do want that, but just don't write in. And it just snowballed, and it became successful. And there never really was a moment when we struggled. It was always just 24/7 attention to growing the business, and we were lucky that way, because I did not come from I did not have a solid business background. I was, again, a collector, and I had to learn about the business aspects as I went along, and I made so many mistakes. So if it had been in a more competitive industry, I would have not succeeded, because I depended on the fact that there was nobody else to buy from. So customers didn't really have a choice. They had to put up with those difficulties of in the beginning.
Yeah. So from the get-go, you didn't ever do any really advertising or anything, did you? It's just all organically built. And was it some of it built on just your own passion for the hobby, and people, maybe you were talking to people on some kind of forum or something like that people got to know you? Is that where the growth came from?
Yes, to an extent. There was a lot of parameters that were set up before I even started the business, and one of my strengths was knowing the psychology of a collector. So I came from a background where I sold coins, so that did have like some lateral transfer in terms of expertise and knowing, I bet you people will like this. So that R&D aspect of it, I had that down pretty pat. What I didn't have was the growth of a business and how to do it with just my wife and I. But we figured it out, little by little, and we did listen to customer feedback, because I didn't have a solid academic background to match this business. So there were a lot of people who were scientists and who knew their stuff, PhDs, and they would say, hey, I would like to see this or that, or can you answer this question? And I'm like, man, I don't know. I'm just like a nerd who happens to collect these because they look cool. But you just do research and you try to answer their questions by asking other people who are aware, and little by little you can bootstrap into it. There's always questions that are above your pay grade, of course, but for the most part, I really focused on just customer service and trying to be responsive to what other collectors wanted.
There's a lot of elements. So was anybody ever able to collect all of them? And was there any issues with certain ones that maybe uranium or something like that you now have difficulty shipping or getting?
Yes. To your first question, there definitely were many customers who were able to complete a full set, which is thousands of dollars. I mean, it's not cheap by any stretch of the imagination, because there are a few that are very expensive and hard to get. And not only hard to get, but as you alluded, there's shipping restrictions sometimes, and it's very difficult to work with radioactive material when it comes, internationally. So there were definitely challenges when it came to that. And for the most part, we just decided not to sell stuff like uranium overseas, just to avoid unnecessary problems. So we kept some of those goodies, that are very difficult to locate, just for the United States. The new management might review that or not, or maybe become even more restrictive. But while I was there, very few orders were sent out, which could have been problematic, mostly just to avoid problems on the customer's end. If something get confiscated when it get to a country. We didn't know how strict other countries are for receiving some material. So to avoid problems, we would just, it's safer to just say, hey, if you really want this, send it to a friend here in the United States, and then you figure out how you're going to get it.
Yeah, you told me a story that was really pretty interesting, where you're in this business for hobbyists and what have you, but someone else took one of their elements and decided to do something else with it, I think, or they weren't for sure if they got it from you. I can't remember exactly the story, but there's some issue in London, I think it was, or something like that, where someone was trying to use the element to do something more drastic than just collect it.
Yes, there was a case that I learned about in London where uranium showed up in some scrap metal, and they closed down Heathrow. It was that serious. So,
oh wow.
So I'm like, you see, this is the kind of stuff that you want to avoid. You know, if you just want to run a business, you don't want to have the attention of the FBI come down on you. So we did our best to, try to stay on the safe side. Yeah. Yes, there always are customers who are wanting to do something bad with this stuff, and you get kind of good at knowing what that is. Some of the stuff that we sold could be used for making drugs, or could have been a poison, or whatever. So, but you would learn soon. You know, if somebody shows up and says, "Hey, can you sell me 10 kilograms of whatever?" You're like, we sell like tiny samples for collectors. We're not like a major factory or anything like that. So we were able to just deflect those and say, oh, you need to contact a big manufacturer for that. And then that was the last of it.
Now, what would have stopped someone like me seeing your success and then saying, okay, I'm going to go ahead and just do the same thing and get these elements and resell them? Like, what was the moat around you that allowed you to do what you were doing without having anybody else just come in and do the same thing?
That's a very interesting question. I think I had the sweet spot of being able to know the collector mentality, which really helps sell the products. It's not just a matter of Jeff going online and sourcing and then reselling at a higher price. For a collector to be drawn in, you need to understand what it is that a collector is looking for. They want visual appeal. They want a story behind each thing that is sold. So if somebody were to copy the business model, they would need to either have somebody like me who happens to have that already along with some business acumen, or they would need to hire somebody who knows about the collecting side, and also, so a small team at least to start getting underway. And then why they couldn't compete with me is because I had very low overhead. I'm one person, together with my wife. So I was able to keep the prices very low, again, appealing to the collectors. So it was very difficult to copy all those elements and still manage to carve out. I was never really anti-competitive with other businesses that thought about it. Some customers did say, "Oh man, I would love to have this business someday," and I'm like, "Do it." There's more customers than I can ever address. So the market share, the market capacity is nowhere near saturated. There's 99% of the people out there who could be potential customers who just aren't even aware that you can do this kind of stuff. So it wouldn't affect me to have 10 other businesses that were doing this. It's just that it never really happened. There are actually a few businesses based in Europe who do more or less the same thing. But again, it takes a special kind of expertise to pull it off well, because it's not just, if you're just going to go on eBay and resell a lump of iron, that's not really compelling to have as a business model. You need to have something that engages with the customer and makes it into a set and makes it, enjoyable, interactive, that you can, try to compete with your fellow collectors or, talk about it and so on. That's a very important element. So it's not just having a static front store.
Market that you couldn't even address. Did you ever try, or did you have a reason why not to like start hiring a team and building this whole factory, as you will, or this thing that would have helped you address that market? Was there any reason you didn't, or did you try? Or
there was. Yes, the reason is that I just never got off my butt to do it. It was just too comfortable for me to handle what I could, and it was an area that I would have had to research, how to do business management and such. And then I would have become an employer and have to learn about permits and have to learn about, what is it like to have to take care of, this employee. All that would have been so stressful that it was like, I was just scared of it. And I said, and I knew in the back of my head, this business deserves an actual team, but it was always just so comfortable to, kick that can down the road that I never got around to it until I met you, Jeff. And eventually we started talking, and I confided, and I was like, I'm burning out. It's just too much. I can't grow the company because we're two people, but at the same time, I'm afraid of taking that step of like starting to hire others and delegating tasks and going through all the legal things of, now we have to be OSHA compliant. For your audience, I don't know, your audience is international, but we have an agency here that tells you what you can have, how you set up your business environment to comply with all the federal regulations. And that could be a nightmare for a company that deals in chemicals, even technically speaking. So I'm like, no, that's just too much of a headache. It'll get handled at some point. And it got handled this year, as you can see, when we handed things off to the new management. And, I wish them the best of luck so that hopefully they can start growing the team and have, some actual business managers who know what they're doing.
One thing, I had a conversation with new ownership, and one of the first things they said to me is, Rassiel doesn't give himself enough credit. He is the GOAT of his industry. There's no one that can just deliver like he does. And so, they really praised you for, just how good you actually did run things, and especially the knowledge you had about, this particular hobby, if you will. And they were very, they praised you so much. So I think that's one of the things that, this took many years to develop and go, you evolved and went through so much. You don't realize, I think, as a business owner sometimes, how much you actually do grow and how much you've gained and how much knowledge and how much the business evolved and what have you, that people just don't realize because they're just every day with the nose to the grindstone. They're not seeing it, and it takes someone else to come and say, wow, look what you've done. Go ahead.
Jeff, I don't think anything that I did is extraordinary. I think that if you have a hobby that you're passionate about, and I think this goes to the heart of the spirit of this podcast, if you have a passion that your material, you already have 75% of what's needed to become an entrepreneur, because you are an expert in your field. And I honestly believe that you just start out small and then you learn day by day what it takes to make the business survive, because it teaches you your errors that you make. It's like, oh man, I better not do that again. So what should we do to make sure that we don't send the wrong thing to the wrong customer, or so that you're putting the wrong box in that place instead of over here. So little things like that are just for the moment. It adds up over the course of years to be like, wow, you know so much about. It's like, I don't feel like that. It's just like day to day, you just adapt to, that feedback that you're getting. Oh, you're doing this right, you're doing this wrong, and then you adjust. That's really all there is to it.
Yeah, I think we have clients that have businesses, that do hobby type crafts, if you will, and different things that they sell online. So basically the same type of, it's not the same, but this online hobby retailing, and a lot of them don't succeed. They come and go. And I think the one thing that I saw about you, and it's one thing I always preach to clients, is like just being, not just humble, but truthful. Like, know that you don't know it all. Be willing to learn. Be willing to know your limitations. I think that was one thing that when I listened to you and stuff, in fact, you talked me into certain things that I was like, yeah, he's right. He's living a great life. Why put all this stress and everything else, like you're saying, dealing with these different agencies that you didn't have to deal with because you didn't hire people? You were able to stay humble and stay truthful, and you're able to look in the mirror and know what your strengths and weaknesses were and play to your strengths and eliminate the weaknesses. And you didn't sit there and become so prideful, or didn't acknowledge that when you made a mistake, you learn from your mistakes. Yeah, that's huge for a business owner. And so I have to commend you for doing that, because it is rare, and I think it's a big part of your success that you wouldn't know if you were just, it was natural to you. And I think that's a big problem with a lot of business owners, that doesn't come natural. It's just a struggle. It's just very hard for them to, whether it be pride or something else that gets in the way of their accepting.
One thing.
Go ahead.
Let me add one thing to that. I decided early on, I'm not going to lie to customers. And I don't want to have a business that sounds corporate, comes out with a press release that uses abstract language, when you can just be, informal to a certain degree and say, this is the deal. If a customer comes to you and says, why don't you have this in stock, or why is that too expensive? I would just tell them the truth. And at least I knew in the back of my head, I'm not going to have to keep a lie to when they come back a second time, remember what it is that I said. I could just say, hey, I don't know when it's coming back in stock, or it's too expensive because I paid this much for it and I need this much profit. You don't like it, I'm sorry, but it's what works for this situation. And I think that is refreshing. Most businesses try to hide in that corporate language, or they try to put their best foot forward all the time, and it separates you from the customer to a degree that I didn't really want to do that. I wanted people to say, well, the guy is an idiot, but at least he's honest. So and it worked out.
Yeah, it is refreshing, and for sure, I do see that a lot where people they're kind of like living a lie of what they. I had one person one time, they would always answer that they're calling you're talking to them at the world headquarters, and they were actually had set up shop in the shed in their backyard. I always thought it was more interesting if they would have said that and people would have really engaged with them, but instead they had this, and they came from corporate. That was part of their thing too. They came from a big corporation, so they were used to doing business in this corporate type sense. So they would talk in these extremes that was obvious that wasn't true, and I'm sure it was a big try and saying that they didn't succeed. They whether they were trying to live up to something that was not possible for them to live up to, or people saw it as disingenuous and didn't engage with them. So I do think that's one thing that you had going for you. And we were talking about why couldn't a big company come, a hobby company come and do what you were doing? Because you had this personal relationship. You had something more than just, you were just, like you said, just selling iron on eBay or selling it in a store. You had something much bigger that came about because you allowed something much bigger than yourself.
Yes, and I think also what you said, Rasiel, earlier about giving top-notch customer service. I think that also what keeps your customers coming in, because they know that the owner of the company won't just give us BS just to say that we're not selling it anymore or something like that. So I think you're all, and you said that you're also selling your like your products, are these called products, your items with a story. And I think feelings, when you hit the right spot with feelings of your customers, I think that's what keeps them coming and getting more of the items that Luciteria was selling. So I really believe in very good customer service. Actually, that's also one thing that Jeff has taught me. If you're in marketing, it's not just always selling, it's also making sure that you know what you're selling and how what you're selling is going to change your customer's life, or building a relationship within it as well. So thank you very much for sharing.
I was lucky. I was lucky in that we had a product that sold itself, basically, because there were people who were receptive already. So I could kind of take the luxury of not ever really having to oversell, like call customers and say, hey, are you interested in this or that? When you have the luxury of having a good product and it's good, then you can forget take off the selling hat and instead just put on the hat of, I'm the educator. I'm going to tell you more about the product, and you're probably going to buy it because you were already interested in the first place. And my role is just to answer questions and to tell you about what it is that makes it exciting or whatever. But whether you buy it or not at the end doesn't really make any difference to me, because again, we had the luxury of being able to have more customers than we had the product to sell, which is rare. You don't often, most businesses are always struggling with the sales funnel and how to generate that interest in getting new customers and so on. And luckily for us, that was never something that we had to really pay that much attention to.
Yeah, I think it too with putting the collection together is somewhat competitive. Is something that I remember a kid collecting baseball cards. You always want the cards you don't have, or someone else has and you get it. And I imagine sometimes with sometimes with maybe some supply shortage or whatever, that just increased the want. And now if you tell me, hey, we can't get that to you right away or what have you, it probably just increased their emotion to try to get that and even more push for it.
It's sort of like the Pokemon cards or something like that. You like baseball cards used to be, right? And you always wanted to get the very rare ones. It's just that's part of the psyche of collecting a set of anything. There's the easy ones that you can knock off, from right away, and then it gets to be more and more of a challenge. And that's really what drives that mentality, and it makes the business successful if you can, offer the entire range and not just, focus on the very expensive stuff. That doesn't work. People can pick up on how hard up you are to just make a buck as opposed to sell the entire story. And there were often days that I would spend an hour writing, an 8th grader about where to get copper in his, area. No CEO does that, but it was fun for me. And you engage with that again. At the heart, I was a collector, not a businessman. So you can see how that works in the favor of the customer in the long run, because hey, here's a guy who's not just trying to sell me stuff, but I can actually have a conversation with and teach me this, and I can learn a little bit about that and so on. So I think that is also important for a successful business that is at least small. When you get to the size of a corporation, you're going to lose that, because then you're talking to 100 different people. But for an entrepreneur, I think it's very important.
Now, we were just talking about shortage and supply stuff. Did you have it where that something just was not possible to, and what were the challenges just getting the supplies and then managing inventory? I mean, you're sitting there doing, and I know your wife's helping too with packaging and all these different things. Where were your biggest challenges in that, and how did you overcome them, or were you able to overcome them? And I know, you were getting tired, and some of that might have led to that. I'm guessing that part of it was the one more that was the tiring part, if you will. Yeah, can you expand on that?
Sure. There was never, in the 10 years that I had the business, never a single day that we had full stock of everything. There was always a shortage of one thing or another. And it took all of my project management skill to try to keep the stock levels high, because we had hundreds of SKUs, and there was just no way to, manage a supply line that could stretch into dozens of different suppliers without there being a hiccup somewhere along the way. So it was always management. It was never domination of that subject. It was never a moment where I could rest and say, hey, the pipeline is all set. Now all I have to do is click on, on a line on a spreadsheet and order more, and there it is. It was never that way. And especially for us, because we're based in the United States, most of the manufacturers were overseas and China mostly. So anybody could go on Alibaba or AliExpress and find, oh, there's that one thing. But to have the full SKU line that we had, some of the products were developed in-house too, but it just becomes very challenging the more you want to scale up. And if you are a business that is selling basically sets, because that's what appeals, then if you don't have everything, then you're going to disappoint your customers to the point that they may not even start the set in the first place, because they don't feel like they're going to be able to complete that set. So we had to focus on getting at least something of everything that we sold, and always had that in stock at all times. We never were quite able to get it done, but we came close. And there were some high, what do you call them? The items that people want the most, that are very difficult to get, that never became something. Yeah, there was never a moment where we felt comfortable that we have enough, because there's a reason why it's hard to get. It's because there's either very little of it, or there's very few people who deal in that, or it's difficult to iron out the wrinkles of importing it or exporting it. All those things work together to make some of those items very difficult to get. But we, luckily, it got to the point where the supply network knew that we were the major business in this little industry, so we would have first dibs and be offered things that nobody else would get a chance to get, and that put us in sort of the area where we knew we had a privilege, because this is something that is difficult to get. So yeah, give us as much as you can of that one thing, and we're happy to work with you. And we made sure to keep those suppliers happy by paying them right on time. The day they asked for the bill to be paid, it was there, come hell or high water. So we knew to also keep that back end healthy by responding to the needs of the suppliers and not lying to them or say, oh yeah, I'll pay you next month. That was never going to work. We knew if there is ever a day that I don't have enough money to buy the product, I'm just not going to carry it in the first place, because I don't want to have that relationship with the people I buy from. I want them to look forward to selling to me, because they know they're going to get their money and their questions answered right away. And it worked out. That ended up being an aspect of the business that I'm lucky to say that it worked from very early on in that manner.
Now you went to China, right? And how was that? Like, now you're dealing with this. Oh, you did not? Oh, I'm sorry.
I never did go.
You never did go. Okay, but you did have relationships with Chinese business people. And so how was that? Was there any like language barriers or cultural barriers, or was the business, was it just as if you were talking and dealing with someone in the US, or was there challenges with that in any way?
You'd be surprised, Jeff. The Chinese, well, in my case, we did most of the business dealings over email, and their translation software is so good that you forget that they don't know English. They have that down to a science, and it's almost real time often that they can answer you in perfect English. It's not like it used to be. I remember 10 years ago when you would get a pamphlet written in English and you'd be like, what is this? It was just like people would post it online because it made no sense what they would say. Now they're really caught up on that aspect, and the communication is 100%. You literally forget that you're talking to somebody who doesn't know a lick of English, at least through over email. And I'm sure it's like that also with verbal if you are more of a phone type, or if you go there in person. You have your phone app that can speak in Chinese. You speak into it in your language, and it answers in Chinese, and perfect Chinese. So that really does help business dealings, and it was never a problem when it came to the communication barriers.
Yeah. Now, I remember. So you started working with us back in like end of 2023. And you came, and I remember one of our first things was the inventory and tracking and trying to get that where we could understand. And I know we had the inventory counts and stuff. So, and you're saying, wow, I got like your day was so full of filling orders to take time to do an inventory count. I know that was a big ask of you and a burden for you. When you did that, were you shocked by your inventory count or anything like that? Did you at that point, did you ever think that, wow, it'd be nice if I could just have this one way and just boom boom know it? Or what was your thoughts just at that point? We just met, so you're dealing with a CPA firm. Were you worried that I'm going to be like, hey, this isn't proper accounting? What are you doing? What was your feeling with that?
I knew in the back of my head that I was doing it the wrong way, but again, it's like what you're comfortable with. And for me, I had 99% of the information in my head. And again, I think we had like 1,000 different SKUs, which is it's completely irrational to expect somebody to know all this stuff off the top of your head, But I was resistant to doing it the proper way simply because I was scared. I didn't have a lot of free time, and I knew that there was a time commitment in learning how to do things the right way, actual inventory management software. And people would give me that advice. And in the back of my head, I knew that there had to be a better way of doing that. But I just never got over that obstacle, that mental barrier of, okay, I'm going to dedicate, a couple days to learning how to do this, and we're just going to make that system work. It was one of those obstacles that also held me back, and because you're spending so much time just on knowing what you're out of or low of, or the inventory counts are not correct, and that you're selling sometimes things that don't exist in the warehouse. It's like, no, this is bad. You're disappointing customers who you have to come back and say, hey, I'm really sorry, but that thing that you really wanted, we don't have it. And I hated doing that. And when I spoke with the potential new owners, they said, oh, we're going to automate that, and hopefully they have that. And I'm like so glad to hear that, because I knew that was one of our weak links. I don't know if that answers your question.
I can just say it was a joy to talk to, again, a business owner who didn't try. We're advisors, right? And so we have to know the facts and be told the truth too. And a lot of people, they come to us and they, someone, I remember my mom, before, guests would come over, she'd clean the house, or, before she wanted to make sure she had the best presentation. And she wouldn't tell people, that she's missing, this cup from her tea set or whatever. And so you were never like that. You were very honest, and you said, yeah, I got an issue here. Can you? And it made it so much easier to work with you and advise and help. And yeah, so it was a joy working with you. So I really enjoyed it because of that. It's just, there was never a struggle getting information from you. You were always willing to share everything, because you didn't try to cover anything up. You just said, yeah, this is what it is. And it was very refreshing. Now going with that, the whole theme of the supplies and stuff. Now we got to this point in time, and you're already kind of in sell mode at this point already, but the tariffs hit. What was your feeling about that? And did you have any fears there, or did you feel like, hey, everybody is going to get tariffs, it's going to hit everybody the same? Well, did you have any thoughts about that, or you already into the?
It was definitely definitely the biggest challenge that we ever faced, because so much of our product came from China, and knowing that supply line was in danger, either because the tariffs were, overnight tripled, or because the Chinese supplier said, we don't feel comfortable sending it anymore because we're going to get in trouble with our own laws. Just working around that became a major headache, and it's still not resolved. This definitely affected thousands of other small businesses here in the U.S. and worldwide, because the Chinese were smart enough to say, we're not going to just single out the United States. We're putting these export restrictions worldwide to make sure that they don't just buy it through a third country. And it worked. It really made things very difficult for us to get some of the commodities that we needed from them. But like you said, when the playing field is leveled for everybody is suffering right along with you, and there's only so much you can do. You're just a boat in the sea.
You were actually in the sale process at this time, and we're talking to potential buyers when this hit. It could have really killed your opportunity to even sell the business. And I think your approach, again, you never hid from it. You never denied there was this issue. And your take was, hey, there's always issues in business. So we have to, whether it's this or something else, there's always going to be an issue. And you're just going to deal with it and figure out how to react to it, and you'll get by. And you won't necessarily resolve the issue, but you'll be able to manage it and make your business react to it properly, that you'll still be profitable business. People are still going to want the elements, right? And so that approach, I think, again, not just like drew customers to you, but it also drew buyers to you. And I never had, when we were talking to buyers, none ever said anything like, oh, I feel like this person's trying to hide something, or they're trying to avoid this question, or they're sugarcoating something. No, they always spoke very fondly and greatly about that. And I think that's what gave the trust of these higher evaluations and stuff that you got, is because they did trust you.
I'm glad that honesty won out then in this one time, because it plays into how I always felt. I'm not going to BS myself into a sale, because that's just not my style, number one. And number two, it just sets up the door to problems down the road that I don't want to deal with. Yeah. I knew that I had a good business because there were plenty of customers, and it was easy enough finding, sales were never going to be the issue. It was always going to be procurement, or, how you handle customer service, or other issues. But, almost unique for us is like, there's going to be plenty of people waiting at the door if you have the good stuff and, you take care of your customer. So for an entrepreneur, I think that's almost like the golden scenario where you only have to worry about, oh my God, I have too many orders to work on today. That's the kind of problem every entrepreneur wants to deal with. I have too many customers. But that's not to say that the problems that the business had were any less serious, because if you can't get the stuff that the people are looking for, that's a problem. So
it's one thing to have customers that are competitive and are looking forward to something and having to wait and make it, building up that thing, as opposed to people getting frustrated. And you're able to walk that fine line and avoid people are getting just outright frustrated and not coming back. And so that's big hats off to you.
That's when we started reviewing the potential buyers. That's what I told everyone up front. This is what you don't have to worry about, and this is what you do have to worry about. And as you said, as things kind of settled down into the home run, I spoke to the new owners and I said, I feel really bad that this is becoming more and more of an issue with the that are affecting this type of business. I'm here to help post sale, and in fact, to this day, I'm still working behind the scenes, with the ideas of like, if you can't get this, then how about you do this other thing, and I expect to continue doing that, because I want to see to it that the business is successful.
Yeah, and in that regard, that the business stays successful, and they'll know what they're up against, and then that way you got the right fit in the buyer. The buyer knew up front what they had to deal with, and that produced the right fit, and the sale went off without any issues because of that. I remember Milfy, who, as you know, helped us with vetting buyers and helping getting information, helping people fill the due diligence and stuff. And she used to say, "Wow, why is he wanting to give this information away?" And and she was like, "Is he going to kill the cell doing this?" And she was worried. She was worried for you. And yeah, I just told her like, "No, this is great. This is so refreshing." That because mostly, yeah, people that sell stuff, yeah, they're sitting there. They try to build this like pretend thing that's very exclusive, and you have to jump through all these hoops to try to buy it. And they played this hard to get, in the dating sense, I'm hard to get type of person.
Right.
Yeah, it was it was very refreshing. What led to that? Why did you're hitting numbers again? Yeah, you're 2.5 in revenue, 5, $500,000 in net. You're living a great, you're doing so well. Why now sell? Why did you go to this thought that, okay, I need to wind down and sell? And can I just ask you too? I remember you kind of coming to me. I kind of remember you coming to me and you says, "Jeff, I'm tired. I'm going to just go ahead and start selling everything off, and you're going to sell off your inventory." And I was like, no, don't. You got something really valuable here. I was like begging you not to sell it, and if you are, or not to walk away from, if you don't walk away, and if you are, let's try to sell this thing. And do you remember that? What was you thinking? What led to
Absolutely.
that?
Absolutely. And you hit it right there. That was the major reason. The biggest reason was that I was just getting overworked. The business was literally from whatever time you get up, so however long you want to work at night, you're never going to catch up with what you have to do. There's always going to be things that you're just going to have to take care of that tomorrow. And doing that 7 days a week for years on end, it just, yes, the money is good. I'm a materialist. I like having nice things just as much as the next guy, but your time, you're seeing like your best years just be taken up. You have no social life. You can't do anything other than take care of your business round the clock. It gets to you. And I know that it's probably people are saying, who are listening right now, saying, "Man, I just wish I knew what that was like, getting all this money." And you're just running your business and yeah, you become rich doing it. Believe me, it starts out maybe that way, and you're like, "Wow, I'm made however many thousands of dollars this week." Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. And in the beginning, yeah, you have so much adrenaline that you just want to keep going. But talk to me about 3 years later that you're doing it day in and day out. It's like, I want money, but I also want to be able to, travel and do the fun things that I want to do. And that's what started happening towards the last 2 or 3 years. I would say, look, I'm just going to shut the business down for a couple of weeks. I'm going to go travel with my wife, and we would, take off and put on a flyer up on the homepage saying the business is shut down for 2 weeks, and we will any orders that come in during this time, we will take care of as soon as we get it back on such and such date. And I would expect every time it's like, well, we're going to come back and there's going to be 1 or 2 orders. And no, people kept buying as if we were still there. And I'm like, don't people know that they're going to be waiting a couple of weeks before they get their stuff in the mail? Not even in their hands, but just to get it in the mail. And I never could figure out why there was that much hunger for the stuff that we had. But can you imagine coming back to that after you had a vacation? Is like, well, now we can't sleep for the next few days because we need to get all this work done. And you can see how the more that you want to like pull back a little bit, and there's growth in the business just happens because people start talking to other people. No marketing, just word of mouth. You're constantly dealing with more growth, but fixed capacity. And, the heart is like diminishing. It's like, oh man, it's just too much. The other part of why we wanted to sell is because I knew that this growth really deserves, this is a nice company, man. And I'm the bottleneck. It deserves to have a management team that knows what they're doing and can grow it and service the customer properly. Because all I'm doing, if I keep doing this, how I'm doing it, is I'm like putting my strangles on my own company. And that's not good. The company doesn't deserve that. It's a good company. It deserves to have a management team to grow it.
Wow, that's saying that you really took your mission seriously. That you were really, you cared more about the mission of the business and getting good product in customers' hands than you did your own ability, wanting to make money or you're wanting to take off more extended times and stuff like that. So yeah, that really speaks volume. And I could really relate in regards to I tell people all this time, running a business, owning a business, it's a tough gig. It's a very tough gig. And, people see I don't have a boss. I could be flexible. I could work from home, all these different things. And no, it's a tough gig. And I actually, I have old schoolmates that they went and did the factory route. And sometimes I envy them. I'm like, wow, you could go on a vacation. When you come back, that line just kept going and someone was in your place and filled those orders and did everything. Right. And you come back and you just pick up where you left. Things were taken care of for you. And as a small business owner, no, that doesn't happen. And you come back and now it's like, I wish I didn't take that vacation because now I got more to do than ever and I'm way further behind. It's a tough gig. And so your dream then too, and I really don't know, and this is one thing I'm hoping to learn today is, I know you told me, you're mid-50s and now you wanted to go to Spain. You wanted to, I think it was, you wanted to live in Spain, right? And that's kind of a dream of yours. Is that where are you from Spain? Is your family, do you have family there? Is it, no?
No. No, we're going to be expats pretty soon. Okay. Moving over there to retire basically, and I'm going back to doing what I used to do before Luceteria, which was working on coins. I'm writing a book and just taking it easier. That's our plan. Spain gives another pace of life, which is slower, but higher quality. Many would say, it's a focus on just family and taking it easy. And they take the siesta, which is like they don't work from noon to 3 o'clock because they feel they owe that to their employees to just take a little time off in the middle of the day. And you can't get anything on Sundays because everything is closed. So, there's an aspect of that that's alarming to me because as a consumer, I want to have, I'm an American. I want to have everything I want when I want it. But on the other side, it's like, oh, that's pretty cool that they can just be so chill about life, So that was the appeal of that.
Very nice. Yeah. It's as we do this DreamWalk thing, I find that everybody's dream is different, and there's so many different things, and how the business is able to they're able to leverage your business and realize that you've been able to do that. And so your story is really incredible. I know you feel you're just this ordinary guy and what have you, but so many people try to attempt what you're doing, and I go back to the character. A lot of their own character flaws, their own situations get in the way a lot of times. And you mentioned about you had this product that easily sold and stuff. I can tell you, there's so many different business people come to me with different ideas and businesses that they come, and it always seems that way. The ones that you would think this is going to be at best some little small thing. There's no way this is going to be a multi-million-dollar business, and yet time and time I'm surprised. And it always comes back to the owner and how the owner took this idea and didn't give up and kept pushing through all these issues and getting over these humps and building something really nice, and that other people said, wow, I wish I had something like that, and been willing to buy it. And so, yeah, my hat's off to you, Rassiel.
Thanks, Jeff.
We're friends on Facebook. I see your posting when you went to Spain, and Rassiel, man, he's living his dream.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. I hope that the listeners of this podcast, what they take away is not, anything other than if you have a passion that you think might sell, it's definitely not going to be easy. Like you said, it's a lot of work, but I think if you approach it with the right mindset, you at least stack the odds a little bit more in your favor of knowing, hey, I'm not going to make the mistake of trying to come across that I'm bigger than I really am, because that's like putting up like a facade that, as you said, that divides you and the customer, which is not what you want to do. I think people can relate to the problems that people have. And if you tell your customer, look, I couldn't get this to you today because I had, this problem. I'm sorry for apologizing, but the truth is, I just couldn't get to it. But I will get to it tomorrow, or whatever the case may be. But if the customer knows if you're just giving them a line or you're leveling with them. And I think it's almost like there's that knee-jerk reaction of, oh, I'm just going to cover for myself and make myself look good, when you don't really need to do that, and you're actually doing yourself more harm than good by doing that, because they're going to pick up on it, maybe subconsciously or maybe right away. They're going to be like, that's fishy. But either way, it doesn't work in your favor. So, one thing that you can take away from this podcast is give it a shot. Be honest and say, hey, this is really what's happening on this problem, and gauge how that is as one small factor in the way you run a business.
I hope people wait this podcast do that. Like, oh, I need a team with count on that. So, yeah, thanks, Rassiel. Hey, Andy, I'm sorry, I've been hogging all the interview questions. Please, I'm sorry.
Actually, Jeff, we've already gone through all of the parts of the podcast. Like I said earlier, it's going to be free flow of conversation. So you didn't know you actually already asked all the questions for each segment. So thank you very much for doing that. It was more like just you guys catching up with each other, and I like being a part and just reacting to what Rasiel has to say and what you also like to say. So yeah, and I think for myself though, I feel like I am one of the listeners that's just actually listening to this podcast that we're having right now. So I feel like I've really learned. I'm not a business owner myself, but seeing someone who really started it because of his hobby and a passion really, I think, is inspiring for people who just say, I think this is just a hobby. It won't sell anything, or it's not good enough if I make it into a business. So I think this podcast, like you said, Rasiel, it's not just about what you're also expecting to make, because there are also a lot of responsibilities. Even though you're making 500,000 a year or even more, it also goes with how it affects you as well as the business owner, how tired you can be in the process. So I think I've learned a lot of things during this podcast. So thank you very much, Rasiel, for joining us today. Jeff, anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap up?
No, yeah, I mean, it's just been a joy working with you, Rasiel. I'm so happy to see that you were able to, do everything you were able to do, and that brought this great product to the market that people were able to enjoy. And yeah, it led to, I know you didn't get into this because of that, and it led to really much greater things, and you're able to realize this dream you have. Yeah, it's just a fantastic story, and yeah, you're an inspiration.
Thank you so much to both of you. This has been a real pleasure, and I hope to stay in touch with Count on that as time goes on. Even if we don't have a business relationship, it's wonderful to know that we've hit it off on a personal level too. So I'll still be here. Thank you both. I really appreciate the opportunity. To speak to you today.
Yeah, thank you, Rasiel.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rasiel. And again, for everyone that's listening right now and even watching, this is exactly what we do, how we do, and why we do at Count on That. It's not just about numbers. It's about helping business owners build something valuable, make better decisions, and ultimately create options for their future. So Rasiel, thank you again for being here and sharing your story. And thank you all for tuning into the DreamWalk podcast. We'll see you in the next episode.